So we started by presenting the findings of the study. Now we're going to conclude with an expert from the academia, and he has also expertise in working with companies. So he can give us a great perspective. Dr. Alessandro Lanteri, Associate Professor from Abu Dhabi University. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum.
He's also a teacher at the business school at Abu Dhabi University, Halt University before, and now he's at the same time involved in some projects with companies and businesses about time and management, entrepreneurship and innovation. So it's great to have you here, Dr. Alessandro. Many people have questions about the methodology of this study. It's applied on a sample of 27 CEOs from abroad. Let's say we are here in the Middle East. What we should learn from the study as CEOs, some of us here, or going to be CEOs, considering the differences we saw in the study between even the sample itself. Some people, I mean, the variety of the results we saw.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank you very much for this invitation.
Thank you.
For several reasons. The first reason, the main reason, it's very personal, but since I'm here, you are bound to listen to me, I'm going to share it. Growing up, I never really had you know, a superhero or a movie star or a rock star that was my idol. But when I started becoming an academic, I found an idol, and my personal rock star, my personal idol is Professor Michael Porter, who's the author of this study, because he completely redefined what does it mean to be a researcher, a professor, a scholar, to be engaged with the community, to share the learnings. He redesigned business education completely, and so being here and talking about his research is a privilege, for which I'm very grateful. I love this research because, obviously, I agree with you, the research is based on a small sample. The sample is very peculiar. But can I ask you, how many of you consider yourself very busy? Can I see your hands? Okay. How many of you would give me 3 months of your time in which I come to your office and every 15 minutes I want to know what you're doing? Anyone? You say it now, but I know that when I call you, you will all be busy making up excuses.
Come next month.
Yes. Now, I'm obviously joking, but I think that the value of this research is in the difficulty we were just talking about. How difficult is it to analyze the time and the time use of very busy people like yourselves? Now, being a professor at Harvard Business School probably gives you access to many CEOs, and even he could only get 27 CEOs over 12 years to dedicate this kind of time and this kind of micro level of analysis. And it's a data collection of 60,000 hours. And I think that that's an amazing data set. But what I see as the most valuable part of all this is that after collecting the data and putting it together, they use this data, this information about time use, to have one-to-one conversations with busy CEOs. And the feedback from the CEOs, while listening to what other CEOs did, that's an insight. That's where the knowledge comes about and where the knowledge becomes impact for CEOs. So I don't think any of you came here today to learn how to use your time because someone else does it. But you came here to think about how you use your time. I think the core reflection I had, I think Jaiza said it, Maisa, sorry.
Maisa, yeah.
Said it. I think she said it really well. The way you use your time is who you really are. What you do in your life, the attention you give, the time you spend doing things, that's who you are.
But here's the question. I mean, if we took this advice and we took also the results came from this study, we saw people dedicated 3% of their times to their customers, but most of them, they said it was wrong. I just draw my attention to this.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think
yeah.
you hit the point there. I think it was Mr. Ryan who said it earlier. You have to do a lot of soul searching to understand what you're doing with your time and how you manage and how you lead. But then sometimes you really have to sit down and look in the mirror. Are you being honest with yourself? Are you aware of what you're doing really? If you spend 3% of your time with your clients and you believe you spend 15% of your time, who are you really? I'm not here to judge anybody. But I mean, I feel like I spend 15% of my time talking to my students. They probably feel I spend 3% with them. So my leadership style or my interaction style depends on the way I am perceived. If I don't spend the right amount of time with my clients will feel that I possibly don't care about them as much as I really do. So perhaps just in changing this little, by paying attention really, right? You could spend a little more time with your clients and you would immediately, just changing the way you spend time, give them the feeling that you care about them a lot.
But the study didn't show us a benchmark to say, okay, what I'm doing here is right. If I did this, it's wrong. So how we should...
in fact, I think that the study points out, and I think that this is a very interesting finding, that the time spent with clients is the one with the highest variance.
Right.
So there are CEOs who spend a lot of time with clients, there are CEOs who spend barely any time with clients.
Absolutely.
And I think that this is very interesting. So it has to do a lot with your management style. I think it depends also on the company you run. So if you are in a B2B business, probably a lot of your business will be driven by your interactions with clients.
Okay.
So it is really instrumental to your business objectives. If you run a B2C business, I don't know, if you are the CEO of Etihad or Etisalat, you spend less time with passengers or people who use the phone. And that would be natural because you have business developers and sales force and marketing people who do that type of interaction. However, one of the key roles of the CEO is to have interactions with people and clients specifically. Because by talking to people, you gather information. And information is what lets you make the best decisions. Right? So these are the three things. You talk to people, you gather information, you make decisions. And you have to choose carefully and smartly which people you spend time with. I think the research also showed that or at least the authors suggest that some CEOs spend too much time with investors and not enough with clients. Now the question is, what kind of information do you get from these parties? If you spend a lot of time with investors, investors will put into your mind the idea that the stock price is the most important metric. But how many of you want to run an organization so that the stock price goes up? I mean, is that really a drive in your life to raise the stock price? I'm sure many of you are much more ambitious than that. You want to make people happy. Right. And that is just a tiny metric. So listening to people puts you in the right position, I think, to do your job in a better way.
From this, I want to ask you about the context, the cultural, or the culture factor, let's say, in a time management. Sometimes I think there is a controversial issue here. So when we say, okay, it's a cultural issue, context, even individual issue sometimes, and I manage my time depending on myself, but in the same time, I'm required to follow the pace of the fastest economies I'm working with. Here we are in the UAE. We're dealing daily with Europe, with the US, so we need to be on the pace. If I followed the slow motion of my country, if let's say UAE is faster compared to other countries in the Middle East, but I followed the pace of my culture, I will be late. So how we should understand this?
No, I completely agree. And it's very interesting that time is a very democratic thing. Every one of us has the same amount of time, and time never comes back, and this is true. But at the same time, time is very different and very subjective. So what I mean by time and what you mean by time is different. What different people mean by a deadline is very different. There are different cultural differences in what time means, really. So in the West, especially in American system and Northern European systems, there is this idea that time is linear. There is a beginning, and then there is an end. And when the time is gone, it's gone. So you have to use it wisely. As a CEO, you maximize the use of resources. You have to be efficient. So when that's gone, you should have done something good with it. If you go to Eastern Europe, you have more of a cyclical notion of time. So time starts and then it ends, and tomorrow there's another day, and then there's another day, and there's another day. And these days are all coming back. So the way you understand time and the way you use this resource is cultural.
Right.
Now, if you want a practical advice, you should never take practical advice from professors. Okay, that's. But I'm very happy to comment on.
You have practical experience, so
I do. No, that's true. So I do work right now. I'm working with 3 teams designed in a large multinational. So one team is NAFTA and LATAM, so North America and South America. The second team is Europe and Middle East, and the last team is Asia. And you wouldn't believe it, they work in the same company, they're in the same division, and they have very similar challenges. And I'm supervising them and helping to go through these challenges. But they understand these challenges in completely different ways. So it is true that the cultural component is very substantial. Although within the organization, which is an engineering-driven, so very technical organization, they develop an understanding of expectations and deadlines. But that happens through very clear discussions. So,
that's the point, actually. Some people reframing even this question, the time management, to another question. The problem is time efficiency or efficiency management rather than time management. So how do you see this?
Yeah, so it's very true. And I also believe that, so the way you consider this resource, time, also, and this comes out of the research really, shows who you are as a leader and as a CEO. So let me be a bit provocative here. So this paper, which I loved, and I'm very happy that I have the chance to discuss, this paper suggests, and I believe many of you intuitively understand why, that you should spend less time in meetings. And CEOs say meetings should be shorter, we should spend less time on it. Why? What is a meeting for? If the meeting is about making a specific decision, then let's not even meet, like 5 minutes. But I think that Dr. Russell explained it very well. Meetings are also the unique opportunity for CEOs to set the tone of the culture of the company. You can't do that on WhatsApp. You have to be in a meeting. You have to show people that you listen to them. You're bored, you're late, you have other things to do, fine. But still your job is to be there and show that you care, I believe, right? So it's always very important to see that there are deadlines, you have to meet them, non-negotiable, and I understand. So you're sometimes under pressure, you don't care enough for other people, you rush through to a deadline. Absolutely, it's your duty. But it is also your duty to be there for your people. Absolutely. So I don't think that maximizing the output per minute is a wise use of CEO time.
Great. So let's move, maybe the best solution is to categorize the meetings, as Dr. Khalid suggested. So let's move to the technology question, how technology affected the time management. We heard from the experiences of some CEOs participated in a panel and speech, different approaches.
Yes.
I don't know if you agree, but I think we are in an era of uncertainty about the best channel or the official channel, because the CEO might prefer to be contacted via WhatsApp. Other might be offended because he would consider it as a privacy. The WhatsApp is only for my family, for example. One CEO told me once, actually, he preferred to be contacted via Instagram only. So some still with the email, and So we hear even some misunderstanding sometimes because I contacted you many times via email, Dr. Khalid, you didn't reply, so I discovered later this has not happened with you. Actually happened with Ryan. Where's Ryan? Okay. So lately I discovered Ryan, he said, I no more use email. So tell me about where we are going to this.
So I think that
where we are heading.
I think someone said it earlier, and I second that completely. You have to keep up with technological evolution and drive it within your company because this changes faster than it's ever been before. And if you miss a couple of steps in the process, you're left out forever. So whatever is cutting edge now, I think that that's more or less the direction you have to go towards. I'll give you an example from my industry and from my experience as a professor, and it's not a good example, so I'm not bragging. I'm apologizing for being so bad. If you open my work email, you will see that all of the emails coming from my students asking for clarifications about material in class, they're all after 7:30 p.m. Now, why? Why don't they come to my office hours? Because my office hours are at 2 p.m. And at 2 p.m., my students are doing something else. They're in class, or they're working, or they're doing sport, or whatever they please. Right? Then they get home, they have dinner, and when they're done with dinner, suddenly they study. Sometimes, almost never, but whenever they do it, it's after dinner. And that's when they need me. And guess what? When they need me, I'm not there.
You're supposed to be free for them.
So there are colleagues that I know that hold their office hours at 10 p.m. Now, I'm not doing that. My wife is here. I think she will not be happy if I held my office hours at 10 p.m. But it is true that technology has changed our habits.
Right.
And the speed of our life and the demands on our time are changing our habits. So we need to identify contact points that work for the people we need to listen to. If we have a duty to listen to someone, and CEOs have that duty, I think that your duty is to find the moment and a channel that works for them. Mostly because you want to listen to them. It's part of what makes you good at your job and what lets you do your job well. Now, does that mean not having private time? No. Okay. So the balance there is very tricky. Another topic that was mentioned earlier today is the issue of resilience and recharging your energy. I think that we have a few examples lately that link these two topics, the topic of technology and the topic of resilience. I'm sure you're all familiar with Elon Musk.
Right.
Elon Musk champions new technologies for communication as well. Sometimes he cannot handle them very well. Lately, I think he was fined $20 million for using Twitter the wrong way, and he had to step down as a CEO. So you will have the other example of President Trump, who arguably won the election thanks to his use of this technology. So used wisely, these technologies raise your power, raise your influence. Use carelessly or unwisely, I think that they undermine your authority and your reputation, especially if you do not create this boundary. Earlier on, one of the speakers was discussing this topic. So you can't master through, you can't go through with all the duties and all the responsibilities all the time without ever taking a break. And this comes out of the study very clearly.
So, yeah. Talking about technology, do you think the new coming technology or expected technologies will help us, like robots, bots, will help us to have more time in the future? Because if, as Maysa mentioned, she now depends on some virtual personal assistants. Yeah. And in the future, robots will come to your office, to your factory, they're working. So people, humans, might have plenty of time in the future. Should we expect that?
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yes, I know. I believe so. I think that so we will be freed by some of the tasks that are for intellectual workers like the audience today. Some of the tasks that we find more repetitive and more routine and less exciting, then we will be replaced. But I don't think that we will have more free time. I think that we will use more of our time doing more things that we enjoy, that we find valuable. So spending more time with people and talking to them more. I'm not saying that this will be face-to-face in a traditional sense. I expect, I mean, we've seen this. If you look at this as a mega trend over time, communication technology from a distance is improving. So I don't expect that we will be spending more time live in presence. There will be more, you know, teleconferencing, if you wish. Another thing that we will probably have is driverless cars instead of the driver that one of the speakers was recommending earlier on. So these things will free some of our time, and I think that this time will be used just differently.
Maybe also the technology now with the uncertainty I described, maybe getting different notifications at the same time, bringing us maybe annoying messages rather than helping us sometimes. I will conclude with the academia by asking two questions. First to Dr. Hamoud AlMahmoud, Vice President of American University of Beirut. I need to see your perspective in few sentences about what we have talked about. So,
thank you very much. I think this is a very interesting and productive half a day. So I'm very glad that I was able to make it and change my schedule to be here. So I think this was, you know, perfect use of my time. So thank you for that. I mean, the discussions were very interesting, really. And I just want to comment on several, starting with one very interesting observation that Mrs. Maisa mentioned, which is it is critical to focus on quality. And I think there's a common thread across all the presentations that talked about the importance of doing things right and doing what is right. Having an impact is extremely important, and you know, enjoying what you do. Also, several, including our colleague Alessandro, mentioned that enjoying what you do is also critical, and your job becomes part of who you are and defines who you are. The way that you spend your time also defines who you really are. And we are blessed by God to be multifaceted, you know, creations of His. So we're able to do so many things at the same time. You know, we multitaskers. Although the term is relatively recent, but it's been with humankind since ever. You know, the difference between you know, a person in work and a person with family and a person with friends and a person on his own is becoming so blurred. You are, you know, you're all at once. I teach also consumer behavior, so I talk about the importance of the self-concept and how complicated we are in terms of our relationship with our own self. So this is just a quick answer to your question. One thing that I wanted to ask in the very first session, but you know, the time was not in my favor, is that, and here I want to start by saying, you know, I'm to blame because I did not have time to, back to time, to really dig into the methodology of the study itself. But it's interesting to note that this study started in 2006. By two extremely well-renowned, you know, gurus in their field. And I don't know why it took 10 years for the study to finish, because, again, time is a factor there. So I don't know whether, you know, Alessandro has any answer. I'm sure there's a very good reason for it, okay? Yeah. And I'm sure that they did account for it. But again, I blame myself not to go into that.
Interesting question.
No, that's a very...
Thank you, Dr. Hamoud.
Thank you.
Do you want to answer this, Dr. Alessandro?
Yes. So my understanding is, I mean, unfortunately, I was not part of the study itself. So, but I can tell you. So, each of the 27 CEOs was studied for a quarter, so 3 months. So some of them were in 2006, some of them were in 2007, and so on. So each CEO was interviewed once. So That's it. And over 12 years, they collected data on 27 CEOs. So one of the effects you will see is that data collection in 2006 and data collection in 2018 might capture a change in the role of the CEO as well. Right? So what a CEO does today, what he is expected to do, or how he communicates might have changed. So none of them were studied for a longer period of time. Does that answer your question? So I think that they wanted to get to the point where they had enough observations to release the data.
Maybe also
I
Dr.
suspect,
Russell
right?
will participate and answer
Yeah.
the question because he's responsible in presenting the findings. We'll talk about this in over the lunch. But my last question before we close to Professor Chris Beitlis. He is the Dean of the Business School at Abu Dhabi University. Professor Chris, I want to ask you why you said earlier, you told me this morning, the study should be titled How CEOs Manage Their Attention Time, not their time.
Thank you very much. I will also take the opportunity to look at everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I made a note of approximately 10 points, which if I go through, you will probably commit suicide, and that's not a very good idea. I will just mention one thing. Michael Porter is the person who has started the modern approach to strategy, to business strategy. In this context, it's absolutely fascinating and disconcerting to a large extent that there is no mention of strategy. As every CEO knows, you can go extremely efficiently and managing your time perfectly to the wrong direction. You can take the wrong decision and implement it perfectly. The issue is how do you allocate your attention time to take the right strategic decisions and then put in place the infrastructure, the team players, and everybody that can implement this strategic decision efficiently. It's not time management per se. In this context, I would hope and I would welcome an opportunity on another occasion to also talk about strategic decision making and strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So by saying that, we finish our event, we finish our session. I don't know if you have closing remarks. Thank you so much, Dr. Alessandro Lanteri. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hamoud. Thank you.